Welcome to this episode of The Wisdom of Paramahansa Yogananda, brought to you by Self-Realization Fellowship, where each week you can receive inspiration and guidance from Paramahansa Yogananda's Kriya Yoga teachings. The subject of this episode is The Soul's Nature is Love by Brother Saralananda.
Good morning again. A businessman once needed millions of dollars to finalize a certain deal. And so he went to church to pray about getting the money. And as it happened, he sat next to a person who was also praying for money. And this person needed $100 to pay off an urgent debt. And the person was praying out loud, just softly, but out loud, and the businessman could hear this. And so the businessman just opened up his wallet, pulled out $100, and gave it to the man. He was very surprised. He got up, and he ran out of the temple. And the businessman then closed his eyes and prayed and said, "Lord, now that I have your undivided attention." As human beings, we can only listen to about one person at a time, isn't it? Parents of young children can probably listen to about 3 at a time because they get a lot of practice at that. But God has no such limitations. He can give his undivided attention to each of his children. So every time we go to him, he is giving us that full attention. And one of the things that we're learning on the spiritual path that is a great key to finding lasting happiness in life is learning for us to learn how to give our undivided attention to God. When we're meditating, when we're praying to him, to give all our heart, all our mind, all our soul, all our strength at those moments to God is one of the great skills that we're learning in this life. Paramahansa Yogananda once said, "To the one who is very deeply devoted, God talks. He is invisible, but if you have enough devotion, you can find him, for he becomes frozen into manifestation by devotion's power." Now, all of you know that love and devotion are often expressed in little daily ways. When we were children, perhaps we drew pictures for our parents on some days. And those pictures could have been the ugliest drawings in the history of drawing. But to our parents, they were priceless gifts, weren't they? Why? Because they were little expressions of our love for them. And it's the same with God. As we take our heart and mind within and just offer him some little prayer, some little thought, it's a beautiful gift if it's filled with love. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord Krishna, speaking as a pure channel of God's wisdom, said this about how little acts of devotion touch God's heart. He said, "The reverent presentation to me of a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water, given with pure intention, is a devotional offering, acceptable in my sight." And in part of Guruji's commentary on this passage, he says, "This stanza also means that man's most fleeting thought and most trifling action may be used as stepping stones towards his presence. True devotees devoutly offer to him the living leaves of their proliferating spiritual understanding and perceptions, the choicest blossoms of love from the secret garden of their hearts, the fruits of their selfless actions, and the sanctifying waters of intuitive inner divine communion, gathered reverently from the river of meditation." And so these little thoughts, these little daily actions, that are filled with love for God are stepping stones for us toward a deeper perception of our relationship, our loving relationship with God. Now, one of the ways we learn to love God more deeply is by including God in the various challenges that we face in life. You know, each one of us has a lot of different challenges, don't we? If you don't have any challenges, please see me after the service. I'll give you some of mine. You know, raising children can be a tremendous, challenge, very interesting adventure. There was once a woman who, she came to this pivotal experience that we all eventually come to. She got her first gray hair. You remember when that happened for you? For those of you who are a little older? Well, she thought about her parents at that moment and how they had been with her through all the first word, the first step, the first day of school, and now she wanted to share with them this experience. So she pulled out that gray hair, she taped it to a piece of paper, and she wrote a note on it and mailed it to her parents. And the message essentially said, "Mom, Dad, you've been with me through all life's important events, and I thought I would share my first gray hair with you." And so her father wrote back to her and said, "Dear daughter, that was the first gray hair you sent us, but it was not the first gray hair you gave us." And so we all face challenges. For some of us, it's raising children. Other of us, it can be challenges with the body's health. It can be challenges, with our finances. It can be challenges in our relationships. We all face many challenges. And the Guru comes into our lives to help us learn how to face those challenges in a more devotional way, in a way that draws us closer to God. In a stressful situation, we can obviously take outer actions to try to solve that situation. But at the same time, we can take these inner actions of just centering ourselves in God's presence deeply, in some way or another. Our late beloved President Sri Dayamata once shared the following affirmation that can be used, if we're in a challenging situation. The affirmation goes, "Lord, thou art in me, I am in thee." And she explained, let the mind dwell on this thought affirmation. With continuous repetition, feel the truth of what you are affirming. Feel that God's abundant life is flowing into you as strength, peace, guidance, joy, whatever may be your material, emotional, or spiritual need. Feel that the constricting walls of fear, limitation, weakness, loneliness are melting away as your being expands into His omnipresent embrace. And so let's think about this for a moment. When we go to God, she's saying that what is our need right now? What is our greatest need? I'd like you to think about that. What is your greatest need in your life right now that God could come? Is it as peace? Is it love? Is it understanding? Wisdom? What do you need? Pick one thing, and we're going to practice this affirmation together. But when you say, "Lord, thou art in me," and then we can feel God flowing into us as peace, or as divine love, or as wisdom, or as joy. What is it that you most need in your life today? And then she also says, feel the constricting walls of fear, limitation, weakness, and loneliness melting away as your being expands into His omnipresent embrace. I am in thee. To feel, as we're saying that, this expansion of consciousness beyond the little house of the body into our infinite home of the universe. I am in thee. Feel that expansion. So let's just practice this affirmation together. Just sit in the upright meditation posture. Close your eyes. Put your attention at the point between the eyebrows. And then just repeat after me. Lord, thou art in me.
Lord, thou art in me.
I am in thee.
I am in thee.
Lord, thou art in me.
Lord, thou art in me.
I am in thee. Lord, thou art in me. I am in thee. Lord, thou art in me. I am in thee. Lord, thou art in me. I am in thee. Lord, thou art in me. I am in thee. Lord, thou art in me. I am in thee. Now just feel that expanded state of consciousness where awareness goes beyond the little body into our vaster self, the soul. Within our own consciousness, as we strengthen these kinds of devotional thoughts, then no matter how the outer situation works out or how long it takes to work itself out, we are gaining the greatest blessing. We are drawing closer to God and Guru. When a person digs a diamond out of the ground, it's not very attractive. But if that person learns how to cut a facet on that diamond, and then another facet, and another facet, another facet, pretty soon the diamond sparkles in the sunlight. It looks very attractive. And it's the same with our concept of God. When we start on the spiritual path, it can be a fairly vague concept. But as we start to spend time with the thought, what is God like? What is God's true nature? And begin to think about certain aspects of his nature. We are cutting a facet, and our inner concept of God becomes much more attractive inwardly to us. And it begins to pull our attention as we begin to understand more profoundly who God is and what aspects of God are waiting for us to experience as we commune with him within. One aspect of God is that he always understands us. You know, in life we've experienced those who don't understand us, those who don't even try to perhaps understand us. But we've all had friends that do understand us to a great degree. And that's a great blessing in life. And to have someone that understands you always, in all circumstances, what is that worth? That kind of relationship. As many of you know, Convocation is our annual week-long gathering where we have classes and meditations and other events in Los Angeles at the Bonaventure Hotel. And this is broadcast worldwide. And one year, Brother Devananda had just finished giving a class to everyone. And everyone was coming out of the auditorium and going to some were going to the elevators to go to different levels of the hotel. And one of the SRF monks needed to go from one floor to another, and so he got on to the elevator. And he looks a little bit like Brother Devananda. And so the devotees thought he was Brother Devananda, and Brother Devananda had just finished giving a class. And so they turned to him, they were in the elevator, and they said, "Oh, Brother Ji, you gave such a wonderful class, thank you so much." And he said, "Oh, it wasn't me," because he was not Brother Devananda. And they said, "Oh, we understand. It was God through you. We understand." And he said, No, really, it wasn't me." And so he said, "Oh, we understand. You monastics are so humble." And then, the door opens and they get off. They say, "Thank you for the wonderful class." What could he do? Even with the best of intentions, sometimes communication isn't the best, and People don't understand the full situation. But with God, He always understands in every situation. Sri Dayamata once said, "All my life I've had someone to talk to, and that is God. He gives me so much understanding and comfort, no words can describe. I go to Him with all my joys as well as my problems, and that is what you all should do." And so if we make a conscious effort to share more of the highs and the lows with God, more of the challenges right in the midst of that challenge with God, we become more devotional beings. Devotion becomes to take up a larger and larger portion of our consciousness. And as Guruji said, devotion leads to perception. Again, he said, to the one who is very deeply devoted, God talks. A person once said to Paramahansaji, "It's beautiful to think that the Lord loves all of us equally, but it seems unjust that He should care as much for a sinner as for a saint." And Guruji replied, "Is a diamond less valuable because it is covered with mud? God sees the changeless beauty of our souls. He knows we are not our mistakes." And again, what is that worth? To have a relationship where no matter what mistake we're making in life, we can go to someone who knows we are not our mistakes and sees that changeless beauty of our souls and believes in us, that we can get back to God, back to that perfect inner communion with Him. Now, Guruji emphasized that as we go about our duties, we should use the little gaps of time between one duty and the next to just be with God in some way. It's, in a spiritual sense, it's like snacking between meals. With physical meals, we have the physical snacking, we have the main meals of the day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, but a person can snack between those meals. And spiritually speaking then, our main spiritual meals of the day are the morning meditation, evening meditation, and perhaps a meditation at noon. But then between those, we can try to recall what we felt in meditation. We can practice an affirmation. We can practice a little visualization. We can pray about something. Just talk to God about anything in the language of our hearts. And that between those meals, it's so important to just continue that divine communion. These little points throughout the morning, throughout the afternoon. Guruji said, whenever people leave you alone, in the little gaps of time between duties, sit quietly and pray to Him. Reveal thyself. You are here. You can't fool me. You are within me and all around me. I love you alone. So let's just say we finished a phone call, or we finished a text, or finished a load of laundry. There's no rule in life that we have to go right on to do the next thing. We can take that opportunity between one activity and the next just to be with God for a few moments. Just inwardly taking our consciousness away from the outer world and just to be with God in some way that really attracts our heart. However, in life, our to-do list is always expanding, isn't it? It's one of those things that ever expands and expands and expands. So there's a pressure to go from one activity to the next without pausing, without stopping for a thought of God. And so it takes willpower to begin to take these opportunities and spend time with God. Just a few moments here, a few moments there. That takes a lot of willpower throughout the day. Guruji once said, cultivate the will to think of God during activity. It is extremely important that you make this part of your daily life. So it takes this willpower to stop what we're doing and to know that there will be a momentum of my day, of my activities. Once I start these activities, there will be momentum to keep going, to keep going, to keep checking things off my to-do list. But if we use our willpower to stop every once in a while to be with God, that is one way that is cultivating this inner devotion to God. It's one way that we put God first in our lives. Guruji said, all scriptures teach, seek ye first the kingdom of God. And he was quoting that passage from Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, where Jesus said, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. And then he began to talk about how we can put God first in this modern world where we have so many activities, so much responsibilities, duties. And at one point he said, nurture the thought, I must find God. Let that thought predominate throughout the day, especially in the gaps of time between your other duties. So we can even create gaps for ourselves just through willpower, just through putting God first in our lives, where we're doing something and we put a gap. We stop for a moment, pray to God, relate to God in some way, even when it's not between activities. When we read a few paragraphs of a news article about some natural disaster, we can read through all the details of that article if it's a longer article, or we might, when we find a certain point, just say, no, let me stop here and pray for those who are suffering. And just take time to be with God, to pray about the situation, to ask for God's blessing on them, and then move on with the article. And think of the difference. One person, as a habit, reads through many different articles. Another person reads articles but finds things to pray about in those articles and stops one or 2 points throughout the reading and just prays to God for a few moments. It doesn't have to be long, but just prays about that situation. Think about where that consciousness, where that leads us, that kind of habit, where we are praying while we are reading about the challenges that are faced in this outer world. One person is taking that time, using their willpower to create these gaps, relating to God, and at the end of that article, they feel closer to God. They've asked for God's help and blessing in the world, and they have that feeling that God is trying to be active as we become more receptive to Him in our daily lives in this world. The other person just reading through may kind of get depressed about all the negative things that are happening in the world because there's just reading that outer news without any relating it to God in some way. And so as we learn to relate what we're doing to God in different ways throughout the day, it really begins to transform how we experience this world and how much love we feel within for God, for others. And speaking of cultivating devotion to God, Guruji once said, the most enjoyable way of life, whether as a monastic or a householder, is to be in love with Him. It's just to be in love with God. And that is what the Guru has come into our lives to teach us how to do. Amidst all the various challenges, that we are falling more deeply in love with God. Now, we're not always going to be riding the highest crest of devotion to God in life. Sometimes we will feel a dryness within. It comes to everybody. It's a very natural part of the spiritual path. There was once a visitor in Texas who was talking with a rancher there. And he asked the rancher, does it ever rain here? Because it looked pretty dry. And the rancher said, yes. And the visitor said, when? And the rancher said, well, do you remember that passage in the Bible where it rained for 40 days and 40 nights? And the visitor said, yes, I'm familiar with Noah's flood. And he said, well, back then, we got half an inch. So some places are very dry. In some parts of our life, we may go through some very dry periods. It's interesting. And Sri Dayamata was once talking about this challenge that everybody faces on the spiritual path. And she said, everyone on the path goes through such dry periods. We don't feel like meditating. The yearning for God vanishes, and it is difficult to feel motivated. In my experience, there is one saving grace that will lift the devotee over the obstacle of indifference. Be sincere with God. Many times over the years, I've said to him, Lord, you have given me such a heavy burden of responsibilities that I must tell you truthfully, it sometimes eclipses my devotion and great yearning for you. But even when my heart feels dry, one thing you know, Lord, I am sincere in my longing to know you. She said, sincerity is the very foundation of the soul's relationship with God. It means to be able to talk to God, to go to God and talk to him openly and intimately in the simplest language of your heart. Help me, Lord. Lift me out of the sense of dryness and the pressures of drudgery that I feel within. I've come to walk the spiritual path because I want you. And so one of the ways we relate to God is just by being honest about how we're feeling in this moment and asking for God's help. Help me. Lift me out of this. Including God in that challenge, the challenge of those dry periods that everyone goes through. Just asking for his help, asking for his blessing, and just being honest with him about how we feel. You know, that goes a long, long ways to cultivating this deeper devotional relationship with God, where we can go to him with anything, the highest joys and the lowest lows in life. We're sharing everything with him. Now, one of the things that we need to learn on the spiritual path is perseverance. To just keep on with the basics that we're learning on this path of Kriya Yoga. Practicing the meditation techniques, in our meditations, expressing devotion, sitting in the stillness, learning how to study the teachings each day and try to apply some principle of the teachings each day, introspecting about our lives, these simple basics. And just to keep on and to realize that we've been given such a powerful path that will take us to the heavenly shores of deep communion with the Lord. We simply need to keep on, keeping on. In 1952, there was a very brave young woman who waded into the Pacific Ocean not far from here. Her name was Florence Chadwick. She was attempting to swim the channel between Catalina Island and the California coast. And it's a 21-mile journey, and the conditions weren't optimal. The water was very cold, and there was a very thick fog that often happens in that channel. And so she entered the water and started to swim. And she could only see a little bit ahead of her because of the very thick fog. Every time she looked up, just fog ahead of her, put her head down, swam for 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, 10 hours. And every time she looked up, she could just see only a very few feet ahead of her, and there was fog. So she put her down, swam 12 hours, 14 hours, 15 hours. And still, she looked up after 15 hours, and all she could see was fog. And her coach and some family members were in a boat beside her and going along, encouraging her. And just after 15 hours, she decided that she was going to quit. They didn't know in the boat even how close she was to the shore. And it turns out she was just half a mile from the California coast. So she traveled over 97% of the journey toward her goal, and she quit. So they took her into the boat, took her to the shore. And she was talking to the reporters afterwards. And she said, if I had known how close I was, I wouldn't have quit. If I could have only seen the shore. But when I looked up, all I could see was fog. And it didn't look like I had made any progress at all. It looked the same way it looked when I first began. And so on the spiritual path, the fog of Maya, the force of Maya, will try to discourage us. and tell us that we can't find God, we won't find God. We don't have to make an effort because, we won't really find God in this life. And it's trying to discourage our daily efforts. But when that happens, we need to remember the truth. And the truth is that we are very near the heavenly shore. Guruji said that a person doesn't come to the Kriya Yoga path at the start of their spiritual search. They come near the very, very end. And so we're attracted to this path because God knows that we're very close to those divine shores. And we need to spend a lifetime now practicing these teachings, going deeper, making that daily commitment to just simply practice the teachings and never give up, no matter how much Maya may try to discourage us. And Florence Chadwick did not give up. 2 months later, she entered the same waters, but she had a different mindset. It wasn't, oh, I can't make this, might I make this? It was, I'm going to make this swim. I know I can. She wasn't doing it on her own. She had her coach, she had all her training. She had the love of her family and friends. But she said, I'm going to do this now. And she swam that channel successfully. She beat the men's record for swimming the channel. It was a different mindset that I can find those shores. I will reach those shores. And for us, we need to cultivate within our own consciousness that I can find God. I've been given the great blessings of finding a guru, teachings with such powerful meditation techniques. And now I must practice. And with the blessings of God and Guru in my own practice, I can reach these heavenly shores. That's why Paramahansa Yogananda ji came into your lives. Because he sees that in you. He knows you can reach that divine shore of God consciousness. Guruji said, if your heart is sincere and earnest, you will find ways, no matter how busy you are, to seek Him and think of Him. So I'd just like to close our service today with another group practice of this affirmation. So let's assume the meditation posture. Lift the gaze upward gently toward the spiritual eye, point between the eyebrows. And please repeat after me. Lord, thou art in me. I am in thee. Lord, thou art in me. I am in thee. Lord, thou art in me. I am in thee. Lord, thou art in me. I am in thee. Lord, thou art in me. I am in thee. Lord, thou art in me. I am in thee. Lord, thou art in me. I am in thee.
This has been a production of Self-Realization Fellowship, a non-profit organization founded by Paramahansa Yogananda in 1920. For more information about Self-Realization Fellowship and Paramahansa Yogananda, please visit yogananda.org.